Many of you would associate Capablanca with a slow positional style, but in this game, Capablanca absolutely murders the Vienna Gambit. Capablanca is playing with the black pieces, and after e4, e5, knight c3, knight c6, f4, we have the Vienna Gambit on the board. With white is playing Juan Corzo, who is the Cuban best player during the time when the game was played. So after f4, Capablanca plays e into f4, gobbling the pawn, and in this game he shows absolutely no signs of playing positional chess. Knight f3 was played by Corzo, and g5. Now remember, g5 move is a very typical idea to keep this f4 pawn protected, so that after d4, as long as this pawn remains protected, this bishop cannot come into the game. So white plays h4, softening this pawn by putting pressure on g5. The pawn marches g4, and now this knight is attacked. The knight drops to g5, and now if you see, this knight doesn't have many escape squares. Okay, it's very clear that if you attack it once with a pawn, it's gonna be trapped. So why did Corzo play the move knight g5? He knows that it is going to get trapped. Well, the idea is Corzo knows that he's going to sacrifice the knight, and he's going to expose this king and come after this king. This knight is more like a kamikaze Japanese fighter pilot. Okay, it's going to sacrifice itself, but it's going to inflict as much damage on the opponent's king as possible. Capablanca played the move h6, hitting at the knight, and now the knight captures the pawn. Knight into f7, kamikaze. King into f7 happened. White played the move d4, gaining control of the center and also opening the diagonal for this bishop. Now you may think, okay, didn't you promise me that Capablanca is the one who's gonna attack, and here I see that white is the one who's having center control, his pieces are coming into the game, what's happening? Well, yes, Capablanca is the one who attacks, and I'll soon show you how, but I want to highlight an important lesson here. Often what happens in such games I see is black gets overrun by white's extra space. Okay, like for example, white will start pushing all these pawns. There is a very typical motive that I want you to remember. It looks like a pawn sacrifice at first, but what it does is that it allows your bishop to come into the game. Okay, because this bishop is actually going to be a very useful piece. It's going to help you not only guard this king, especially the light squares on this diagonal, and at the same time this bishop is also going to help you guard this pawn. Okay, so in this game, after d4, Capablanca plays a very nice move d5, sacrificing the pawn, and at the same time this bishop comes into the game, protecting this g4 pawn. If let's say knight into d5 had happened, the black pieces just come into the game very quickly. Bishop c4, knight f6, once again hitting this knight, short castle, and now it may look like this rook is gonna come into the game quickly, but there is a typical way to close off this file, to close off the f file, and that is black plays the move f3, and after g into f3, you don't capture this pawn, you just play the move g3. Okay, and as long as this f file remains closed, as long as the rook doesn't get an open f file, this king is gonna feel safe. Okay, by the way, if you're liking the content, do hit the like button. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Over 90% of you are watching these videos who are not subscribers. Please don't do that. It really helps me when you subscribe to my channel. Okay? Thank you very much. Let's go on. So after d5, there comes e into d5. Instead of moving this knight, Capablanca plays the move queen to e7 check. Okay, he's in no mood to, he's in no mood for a backward step. Queen e2 check. Now white has a few options. Okay, first of all, king d2, don't make this blunder. Okay, like you'll just get checkmated. Yeah. Secondly, if let's say queen e2 again doesn't work because there is knight d4, and another move is bishop e2, which can be very dangerous. After bishop e2, black is like, I don't care, you have put this bishop, I'm gonna pin it with the move f3. Now this bishop is pinned. White could short castle. But remember, once again, we have our typical idea of keeping this f file closed. We play queen into h4, and after g into f3, we play the move g3. Okay, we keep the f file closed, and not only are we threatening a checkmate here, and there's just no way to save the checkmate on h2. Because of this reason, bishop e2 doesn't work. So in the game, Juan Corzo plays the move king to f2, getting the king out of the check. Now Capablanca plays the move g3 check, hitting the king. Where does the king go now? It's left with only one move. F3 would be very risky, like super risky. Okay, like h5, and there would be just too many threats on this king. So the king drops back to g1. Capablanca, in no mood to retreat, captures the pawn. Knight into d4. Knight into d4. Wow. Into d4 happened. Now remember, this diagonal is super exposed. So after queen d4, there comes queen to c5, hitting this queen. And remember, this is a checkmate. Checkmate. Embarrassing one diagonal checkmate. Okay, you don't want to fall into this. So to stop this from happening, white had to play knight e2. Now once again, many players would be tempted. Okay, there's a free queen. Let me capture. Let me bring my bishop. But after c3, this knight is protected. And on the next move, white is going to first capture this pawn, then he's going to capture this pawn, and this king is going to have a safe escape square. Okay, this is what many players would be tempted to do. But as I keep telling you, you want to exchange on your own terms. You don't want to exchange when you see an exchange. Don't go and trade it. Okay, exchange on your terms. So here Capablanca plays a very beautiful move. Okay, add this move to your knowledge base. Queen to b6. The idea is first that this bishop is going to come now, and it's going to start fighting for the diagonal. Okay, which forces white to take this queen. And after black takes, now white once again has to deal with this threat. So he has to play knight d4. So you see, suddenly by not taking this queen, you're forcing white to waste two moves to defend this diagonal. And after bishop knight d4, there comes bishop c5, developing the bishop on the diagonal. c3, and the benefit of ab6 is it allows the move rook to a4. Now this rook comes into the game as well. Okay, because remember we exchanged on our terms with a into b6. So rook a4 happened. Now where will the knight go? It can't go anywhere. If white captures this f4 pawn, there is simply rook d4. Okay, this diagonal is just so weak that the single bishop is enough to give a checkmate here. Okay, so bishop into f4 doesn't work. White has to make way for the king, and he will play the move bishop to e2, which is what happens. And after bishop e2, black captures, rook takes. Now this rook protects this pawn. It's not possible to develop this bishop on this diagonal, so white plays the move b3, trying to develop this bishop along this diagonal. Black plays knight f6, developing a piece. Very good move. White plays bishop b2, trying to make sure that he can exploit this all these pieces on the same diagonal. Okay, bishop b2, rook d2 happens. You may think that these two bishops are both attacked. One of them is forced to lose. But white plays the move bishop to h5 check. And now if you capture this bishop, you may lose this rook suddenly. So what do you do? If let's say the king goes to e7, this rook will give a check. And once again it moves, you could lose this knight. Similarly, if the king goes to g7 after bishop c3, white is able to keep both the bishops in the position. And this knight is just in a very awkward situation. It cannot move. Okay. But remember, Capablanca is not in a mood to play a quiet positional game. He wants to kill this king. So he decides it's time to sacrifice the rook with knight into h5. And now after bishop into h8, this king is gonna get fried. f3. Suddenly there is a threat of f2 check, bishop f5 and bishop d3, and it would be a checkmate soon. So white has to capture the pawn. Now with the move f3, it is a pawn sacrifice, but it allows the knight to come into the game. And suddenly this rook, this knight and this pawn, this is a duo that can give a checkmate. Okay, not a duo, sorry. Sorry guys, I'm very excited when I show these games. It is a trio, a very attacking and a very powerful trio that can give a checkmate. So knight f4 happened. Yeah, it's very hard to suggest what white should do. It's like very hard. What can white do? In the game they played the move bishop to e5, and after bishop to e5 there comes rook g2 check, hitting the king. Where will the king go? The king has to go rook f2 check and king e1. Remember, if you go king g1, it's even more embarrassing because you have knight e2 checkmate. So the king has to go to e1, and Capablanca played the move knight d3 check, after which his opponent resigned. You can not only capture this bishop, you can also push this pawn. So after knight d3 check, Juan Corzo resigned. Capablanca won the game. Smash the like button for Jose Raul Capablanca. With this victory, Capablanca also went on to become the Cuban champion, and from there on began the legacy of the player that we know today. Smash that like button if you haven't yet. Thank you for watching. Do subscribe to my channel. If you enjoyed watching this game, you'll also love this game by Magnus Carlsen, where he breaks all the opening principles against a former world champion. Go check it out.